the sink. Doug spent most of his time freaking out in the back of his office, so that's how I got to know deaf Marlene. I would never actually talk to a deaf person before, but I'd been swimming and gotten water in my ears, like lots of times, and felt that underwater silence. I shook my head and watched people's mouths moving without hearing the words, so I knew what it was like for her. I could empathize. Like, I always used to watch those reruns of Facts in Life when they came on, when I came home from school, and I had vivid, uncomfortable memories of those episodes where Blair's stand-up comedian cousin would mock herself, get laughs, and teach tolerance to Miss Garrett and the rest of the girls. She had cerebral palsy, but she talked like a deaf person, so the lesson was the same. I could sympathize, and I could pity. "Hey, so how long have you worked at this place?" I said. She was standing right next to me looking at a dental chart, but of course she couldn't hear a goddamn word I said. I barely resisted the impulse to snap or clap my fingers. "Hey, how long have you worked at this place?" I said again, because sometimes it's hard to remember not to be an ass. Marlene was glancing up mid-sentence and saw that my mouth was moving, and when it stopped, she smiled and nodded her head, laughed quietly and politely, just like hearing people do. And they don't know what the fuck you just said. Blair's cousin was right. We're all the same. Marlene and I stared at each other, and it got awkward, so I considered murdering myself or giving her the finger just for something to do. But instead, I made a fist and stuck my thumb out and screwed it into my cheek, because I saw a monkey do it on Sesame Street, and it means apple in sign language. "Apple like monkey," she shouted, genuinely excited, because deaf girls love Sesame Street. We both laughed for as long as we could, which was much longer than it was funny. She had too many teeth going in too many different directions. Her hair was a frizzy mess. Like she has 3 weeks past a bad perm, and the blonde dye kit was obviously cheap and self-applied. But still, pretty much looked like anybody else. She didn't look especially deaf. But she was. Oh, she was. There was a kind of silence you could only have when it's high noon, or when one of you is deaf. I pointed at her, then pinched my nose closed. She narrowed her eyes confused, then shouted, "I'm not Stink!" We laughed for a long, long time about that. When the detective told me she was dead, there was a pause in my head where I thought of absolutely nothing. A hitch where nothing happened, just before the engine caught. When it did, I wanted to make myself scream, "No!" and start crying, but I knew that I couldn't, even under the circumstances, and the fact is that I had a better chance of bringing myself to tears with assault than Marlene's death. I almost said no shit, which would have been my natural reaction, but this was no time for natural reactions. So, what I said was, "Jesus," quietly, lowering my head as if I was thinking, which I was. "We'd like you to come down to the station, answer a couple questions," Brooke said. "Why me?" "It's nothing personal. We're just talking to everyone she had contact with, just gather information." "Why can't you just ask me here? Why do we have to go down to the station?" "We also need a sample." "A sample?" "Semen was found on the body." "Ew." "What, you don't like semen?" Sykes said, breaking in to challenge me again. "Alright, you want to do this the easy way? Come on down to the station." Am I being arrested?" "No, we're just going to ask you a few questions." "Do I need a lawyer?" "That depends." The trick is to be like Robinson Crusoe. Wherever you find yourself shipwrecked, you build a temporary home out of palm leaves and sticks. You use hollowed-out coconuts for lemonade glasses, and you make string bikinis that you'll never ever wear. You use sand and water to make mud for no reason. Whatever's lying around, you just use it. And the trick is to build everything so flimsy that it has to fall apart. And when it does, it looks like an accident, like unfortunate circumstance, or bad luck, or timing, and that's your way out. Then you get shipwrecked somewhere else and start building again. Wash, rinse, repeat. Why these are the tricks? I do not know. But I would have gotten out long before Marlene was murdered if it hadn't been for Gwen. I couldn't just walk away after knowing Gwen, when literally I couldn't walk. I was incapacitated, sometimes for days at a time. But it was more than that. Gwen was what hysterics think of marijuana. She led to crack and giving hand jobs for $1 on the street, or at least their moral equivalents. I found my way out of her ghetto. I got thrown out actually, but I was stuck there just long enough that I fell right into a bigger, much worse pile of shit than I'd left. I suppose I could blame myself for how that turned out, but I've never been comfortable with that sort of thing. But before I'd started stealing salt shakers, I'd just gotten into town, so I didn't really know anything yet. I was alone at a trendy bar, had overpriced drinks, and the doorman called me boss. And then he asked for my ID, and then he said, "Thanks, guy," when he gave it back. I had hiccups pretty bad, so I had to keep my sentences short, or else people were going to think I was epileptic. This made everything I say sound very wise. "Hi, I'm Gwendolyn," she said, standing beside me at the bar. She had a round face and straight hair and square shoulders. I'd been drinking scotch to impress any strangers who might have been watching me, and I was so drunk I could only see geometry. "Hello, Gwendolyn," I said, in the quiet time between hiccups. "Please call me Gwen. Only my grandmother calls me Gwendolyn." "Then why the fuck did you introduce yourself as Gwendolyn?" I wanted to ask, but that was too many words in a row. "Yeah," I said instead. Gwen worked at a big insurance company where she made important decisions. She was very decisive, but she would have liked the opportunity to be even more so. It's hard sometimes because things can be so structured, and it feels like seniority gets rewarded over how much work you actually put in. I don't want to disrupt the dynamic of the team, we all work so well together, but I don't want to get pigeonholed and wind up in the same position 2 years from now either. Labels are terrible, I said. That's so true. We were connecting. And then we were on the front steps of her apartment, and she was bashing the inside of my mouth with her tongue. My dental work was crumbling like the moon does in the movies where it's the end of the world. Maybe we shouldn't, she said, pulled back, but before I could agree, she started mauling me again. I don't know, and she pressed the side of her head against mine like we were about to Greco-Roman wrestle. I also don't know, I said. But then both of her hands were in the back of my head, and she was stuffing me in her mouth like one of those Japanese guys who eats all the hot dogs. It's a strange sensation being devoured. This could be trouble, she said. She was right. If not for her brute strength propping me up, I probably would have gone headfirst into the concrete steps and broken my beautiful face on the sidewalk. Then she had me pinned against the wall, and it felt good to lean. Far, far below me, the ground was spinning. This isn't a good idea, she said. There are no ideas anymore, I said. And then a hiccup rocked my entire body and rolled my head like I'd just been shot. Just be happy we thought of something. I think that's a line from one of those John Cusack movies. If it's not, it should be. I shouldn't have said it. That's obvious now, but it probably was obvious then too. I didn't really have a choice. I needed to either lie down or throw up, and to do one or probably both on the front steps of her apartment would have been tacky. So I had to go to the bathroom too, and I really had nothing else to do that night, and my scotch-stoked estimation, spending the night with a deceptively powerful stranger didn't seem like such a bad idea. I'd already mistakenly kneed her in the crotch when we first started making out, so I knew she wasn't a man. And that seemed like enough of an endorsement. And I also always wanted to play a John Cusack role, only for a line or two at least. But one line was all she needed. She kicked the door open and flung me inside. I fell over something and broke my ankle, but the alcohol made the swelling seem hilarious. And that was it for me. My already tattered memory was done. Thank you and good night. To be continued.